Hello students, how are you all today? This is Ashar Khan, your geography teacher from Shiv Jyoti Educational Group Kota, and I welcome you all to our video lecture. So students, in this lecture, we are going to study the second part of our chapter, that is chapter number 15, Life on the Earth. So open your book on page number 125 and we will begin this chapter. In our previous video, we have learned about the other topics which were covered in the earlier video. We learned about ecosystems and ecology, biomes, types of ecosystems, structure and functions of ecosystems, and types of biomes. Now, in this chapter, as you can see, we are going to learn about two major topics, that is biogeochemical cycles and ecological balance. Under biogeochemical cycles, we are going to begin learning about water cycle, carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, and nitrogen cycle. So, let us begin. So students, let us begin with the first topic, that is biogeochemical cycles. Let us read in your book, page number 125, keep your pencils ready in your hand, okay? So as you know that the sun is the basic source of energy on which all life depends, right? This energy initiates life process in the biosphere through photosynthesis, okay? The main source of food and energy for green plants. During photosynthesis, as you all know, carbon dioxide is converted into organic compounds and oxygen. Out of the total solar insolation that reaches the Earth's surface, only a very small fraction, that is 0.1%, is fixed in photosynthesis. Underline this, okay? Out of the total solar insolation that receives the Earth's surface, only a very small fraction, 0.1%, is fixed in photosynthesis. More than half is used for plant respiration. So plants are using a lot of sunlight for respiration, and the remaining part is temporarily stored or is shifted to other portions of the plant. Now, life on Earth consists of a great variety of living organisms. Earlier in the first part of the chapter, we learned about different biomes where different types of animals and plants were growing. See? So life on Earth has a variety of living organisms. These living organisms exist and survive in a diversity of associations. Underline this. Such survival involves the presence of systematic flows such as flows of energy, water and nutrient. So in order for an organism to live on Earth, it requires certain flow of energy, water and nutrients. These flows show variations in different parts of the world, in different seasons of the year and under varying local circumstances. Studies have shown that for the last 1 billion years, the atmosphere and hydrosphere have been composed of approximately the same balance of chemical components. This balance of the chemical elements is maintained by a cyclic passage through the tissues of plants and animals. The cycle starts. Now we are learning about the biogeochemical cycle. The cycle starts by absorbing the chemical elements by the organism and is returned to the air, water and soil through decomposition. So it begins with the absorption of energy and it ends with the decomposition. These cycles are largely energized by solar insolation. And how do they start? How are they started? By the process of solar insolation, by the energy of the sun. Now, these cyclic movements of chemical elements of the biosphere between the organism and the environment are referred as biogeochemical cycles. Underline this one. These cyclic movements of chemical elements of the biosphere between the organism and the environment are referred to as biogeochemical cycle. So now let us break this word here, okay? Biogeochemical. Bio, as you all know, refers to the living organism and geo means rocks, okay? And soil, air and water of the earth. Now, because there is a continuous cycle, okay, a flow of energy which is going from organism to the nutrients, that is soil, air and water of the earth, and that cycle is called biogeochemical cycle, okay? Biogeochemical cycle, we have divided it into two parts, that is gaseous cycle and sedimentary cycle. So let us learn about it. See, our first one is the water cycle. You all are very familiar with the process of water cycle, correct? All living organisms, the atmosphere and the lithosphere, maintain between them a circulation of water in solid, liquid or gaseous form referred to as the water or hydrological cycle. We have already learned this topic, okay? We have been learning this since class 3. We know that what happens, the water evaporates because of the heat of the sun, and when it goes in the air, it cools down and then it rains back. This is the water cycle. So that's an easy, correct? Now, moving on to our next part, that is the carbon cycle. So, on page 127, let us start reading. Is one of the basic elements of all living organisms. It forms the basic constituent of all the organic compounds. So, basic element of all living organism by which all living organisms are made of. It's called carbon and its compound. Okay. The biosphere contains over 500,000 carbon compounds in them. The carbon cycle is mainly the conversion of carbon dioxide. Underline this, very important, that what is carbon cycle? It is just the conversion of carbon dioxide, CO2. Okay? This conversion is initiated by the fixation of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. You all know what happens during photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, the plants, okay, the green plants, what do? They take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they fix it. How so? Let us see the further process. Now, this conversion results in the production of carbohydrate, glucose that may be converted to other organic compounds such as sucrose, starch and cellulose. So, the plants, they take carbon dioxide from the air, from the atmosphere, okay, and during the process of photosynthesis, when the sunlight falls on the plant, what happens? The carbon dioxide gets converted into carbon compounds such as carbohydrate and glucose. Okay. Here, some of the carbohydrates are utilized directly by the plant itself. Some carbohydrates, some carbon compounds, the plant will utilize it for itself, and the rest it will store. All right. Now, during this process, more carbon dioxide is generated and is released through the leaves or roots during the day. The remaining carbohydrates are not being utilized by the plants and they become part of the plant tissue. Plant tissue are either being eaten by the herbivore animal or get decomposed by the microorganism. Now, a very simple process takes place. Okay, I'll tell it to you in a simple terms. See what is happening. Okay, we all know that there is carbon dioxide present in our atmosphere, correct? We also know that the green plants, they take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen, correct? And this process is started by the sunlight, by the solar radiation. So what happens? The plant will take up carbon dioxide. During the process of photosynthesis, the green plant will convert that carbon dioxide into carbon compounds such as glucose and starch. Now, what will happen? Some part of that glucose, some part of that carbohydrate, the plant will use for itself in the process of growing, okay? And the rest it will store in its plant tissue. Now, these plant tissues are eaten by herbivores and other animals. Now, the herbivores convert some of the consumed carbohydrates into carbon dioxide for release into the air through transpiration. Now, what happens? The plants which are eaten by herbivores. Now, what will they do? The carbon dioxide that they are taking, the carbon compounds which they are eating, they will release it back to the atmosphere by the process of decomposition. When they will die, their body will decompose and the remaining carbon dioxide will get released back either to soil or to air. The herbivores convert some of the consumed carbohydrates into carbon dioxide for release into the air through respiration. The microorganisms decompose the remaining carbohydrates after the animal dies. And when that animal who has eaten the carbohydrates from the plant, the leaves, okay, when that animal will die, the nutrients will be released back into the soil or the air. The microorganisms will work on that animal's dead body, the decomposers, and they will break down the nutrients. The nutrients the animal has eaten in its entire life. All the plant tissue which are stored in the animal body, they will be released back. All right. Now, the carbohydrates that are decomposed by the microorganism then get oxidized into carbon dioxide and are returned to the atmosphere. It's fairly simple. What is happening? Plants are taking carbon dioxide, converting them into plant tissue. All right. Those plant tissues are eaten by the animals, who further break down those tissues. Okay, some carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere through the process of animal respiration by the way animals breathe, and the rest will be stored in the animal's body. Now, what will happen when that animal's body will decompose on its death? Okay, those microorganisms, the bacteria, the scavengers, that animals that we have learnt about, they will further break down its body into carbon back. Okay, and those carbon nutrients will be sent to soil again, and this process is called the carbon cycle. How else do we use carbon dioxide? Can you tell me? Simple process. Other process of carbon dioxide is by auto and factory emissions. Okay, factories also emit a lot of carbon dioxide, which increases the amount of carbon dioxide we have in our atmosphere. So this was carbon cycle. Now let us move on to oxygen cycle. What process does oxygen go through? And so our next topic is oxygen cycle. What is oxygen cycle? We have learned the process by which carbon dioxide is cycling through our atmosphere and our bodies. Now the same process is true for oxygen. We all know that oxygen is required for our breathing. But from where do we get oxygen? You all know this, that we get the oxygen from plants. By the process of photosynthesis that we have just learnt in carbon cycle, what happens? The plants take in the carbon dioxide. Okay, the plants is taking in the carbon dioxide, converting that carbon dioxide into carbohydrates and storing it for themselves, and now the carbon dioxide will get converted into oxygen, which will be further released into the atmosphere. Okay, so this was the process. Let us read now. Oxygen is the main byproduct of photosynthesis. It is involved in the oxidation of carbohydrates with the release of energy. Okay, energy, carbon dioxide and water. The cycling of oxygen is a highly complex process. Oxygen occurs in a number of chemical forms and combinations. It combines with nitrogen to form nitrates and with many other minerals and elements to form various oxides such as the iron oxide. So oxygen reacts with many other minerals and elements such as nitrogen, it forms nitrates, and it forms with various other metals and form that metal oxide. For example, iron oxide, aluminum oxide. Okay. Much of oxygen is produced from the decomposition of water molecules by sunlight during photosynthesis and is released in the atmosphere through transpiration and respiration process of plants. Alright, so much of the oxygen is produced by the plants by the process of photosynthesis. How? As I've just told you, what does the plant do? The plant is taking in carbon dioxide, converting that carbon dioxide into carbohydrates by the process of photosynthesis, and by the process of photosynthesis, oxygen is getting released into the atmosphere. Alright, so in a very simple term, if I have to say, the plant took CO2, carbon dioxide in it, okay, it used the carbon part, okay, and released the oxygen part out of the leaves through the process of respiration, or in plants we call it transpiration. Alright, now our next topic is, students, that is the nitrogen cycle. So here we have the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is a major constituent of the atmosphere, comprising about 78% of the atmospheric gases. We have already learned that what happens, that 78% of our atmosphere consists of nitrogen. Okay, it is also an essential constituent of different organic compounds such as the amino acids, nucleic acids, protein, vitamins and pigments. Okay, so in a lot of things nitrogen is present. Now underline this, only a few types of organisms like certain species of soil bacteria and blue-green algae are capable of utilizing it directly in its gaseous form. The soil and certain blue-green algae can take up nitrogen, okay, in its gaseous form. Generally, nitrogen is usable only after it is fixed. Now the term here is used fixed, it means converted. Nitrogen is mainly used by other elements when it is converted. Okay, 90% of fixed nitrogen is biological. The principal source of free nitrogen is the action of soil microorganism and associated plants' roots on atmospheric nitrogen found in pore spaces of the soil. So basically there are some bacteria which can fix nitrogen, okay, and they are found in the soil. So what they do, they take up nitrogen from the air and they convert it into different types of compounds such as nitrates, nitrites, ammonia, ammonium. Okay, these actions are taken by certain bacteria and fungi. Now nitrogen can also be fixed in the atmosphere by lightning and cosmic radiation. Whenever there is lightning, that lightning also has the energy to convert nitrogen. In the ocean, some marine animal can also fix it. After atmospheric nitrogen has been fixed to an available form, green plants can assimilate it. Now after the gaseous part of nitrogen has been fixed by the bacteria and fungi, now the green plants can use it because they also require nitrogen in the process of growing. Alright, now the plants will use nitrogen and store it in them, and the animals will eat that. Okay, now these animals are further eaten by other animals, and that is how a nitrogen from the soil will travel all the way into the animals. Alright, herbivorous animals feeding on plants in turn consume some of it. Now herbivorous animals which are eating the plants will consume some of the nitrogen as well. Now what will happen? Dead plants and animals' excretion of nitrogenous waste are converted into nitrites by the action of bacteria present in the soil. Now this animal, okay, either it will excrete throw the remaining waste matter out of its body, and at some point of time the animal will die. Now what will happen? The same process which was happening with the carbon cycle. Okay, microorganisms who were working on that body and they were breaking the compound back into carbon. Same thing will happen with nitrogen. Okay, when this animal will die, whatever nitrogen it has eaten from the plants, it will again be broken down by the microorganism, and the nitrogen will go back to the soil where it will be again worked on by the bacteria and fungi. The same process will take place again and again. Okay, nitrogen can also be fixed by the process of lightning. Okay, whenever there is lightning, nitrogen is converted. Now, there are still other types of bacteria capable of converting nitrates into free nitrogen, a process which is known as denitrification. Underline this, that converting nitrates into free nitrogen is known as denitrification. All right. Now, our next topic is there are some other mineral cycles. Okay, earlier I told you that biogeochemical cycles are divided into gaseous cycle and sedimentary cycle. So these were the gaseous cycle in which we learned about carbon, oxygen and nitrogen. Now in the mineral cycle, let us see what is there to learn. Now let us learn about other minerals as well which are integral for our life. Other than carbon, oxygen, nitrogen and hydrogen being the principal geochemical components of the biosphere, many other minerals also occur as critical nutrients for plants and animal life. Okay, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen and hydrogen, they are very important for us, but there are also certain elements, certain minerals which are found in our environment which are essential for life, for biosphere. These mineral elements required by living organisms are obtained initially from inorganic sources. Okay, they are not obtained from any organic, from any plant or animal. They are obtained from ground, from soil. These are phosphorus, sulfur, calcium and potassium. They occur usually as salts dissolved in soil, water, lakes, streams and seas. So you see these salts, from where will we get them? From lakes, streams and seas. Now, mineral salts come directly from the Earth's crust by weathering, where the soluble salts enter the water cycle, eventually reaching the sea. Other salts are returned to the Earth's surface through sedimentation, and after weathering, they again enter the cycle. So the salt comes from the soil. Now what happens when there is a water running from that soil? It will carry that salt with it to the ocean. There, the water will evaporate, but the salt will remain in the water body. Now, all living organisms fulfill their mineral requirements from mineral solution in their environment. Other animals receive their material needs from the plants and animals they consume. After the death of living organisms, the minerals are returned to the soil and water through decomposition and flow. Same thing is happening here. What? That we are utilizing these chemical compounds such as phosphorus, sulfur, calcium and potassium. All right, we are using them, plants are using them as well as animals are using them. Through food chain, what happens? Some plants, some animals eat the plants and some animals eat the other animals. All right, and we all receive the same nutrients from that plant's body. After death, what happens? Those nutrients that we have absorbed, they will get back to the ground, soil and air. So our last topic of the chapter, that is ecological balance. So in this up till now we have learnt about the biogeochemical cycles. Now we are going to start about ecological balance. Okay, ecological balance is a state of dynamic equilibrium with a community of organisms in a habitat or ecosystem. What is ecological balance? Ecological balance means that there is a balance between the different organisms which are found in a habitat or an ecosystem. It can happen when the diversity of the living organisms remains relatively stable. Okay, gradual changes do take place, but that happens only through natural succession. It can also be explained on a stable balance in the numbers of each species in an ecosystem. This occurs through competition and cooperation between different organisms where population remains stable. Underline this. How do we attain ecological balance? This occurs through competition and cooperation. Either the species will compete with each other and the strongest one will survive, or they will have to cooperate with each other so that they can live together. These are the only two ways in which a balance can be created inside an ecosystem or a habitat. Now, this balance is brought about by the fact that certain species compete with one another determined by the environment in which they grow. Species compete with one another. Okay? This balance is also attained by the fact that some species depend on others for their food and sustenance. Such accounts are encountered in vast grasslands where the herbivore animals like deer, zebras, buffaloes are found in plenty. On the other hand, the carnivorous animals, tigers and lions that are not usually in large numbers hunt and feed on the herbivores, thereby controlling their population. So see what is happening here due to the process of food chain. So if we take the example of a grassland, okay, in grassland you will find different herbivores such as buffaloes, okay, zebras and deer. You will see that their population is quite large, okay, and you will see that carnivores like tigers and lions, they also live there, but their population is relatively small. Now what is the job of these tigers and lions? They are hunting on the deer. ये क्या कर रहे हैं? Herbivores का hunt कर रहे हैं, and thereby they are controlling that species population. What happens suddenly, tell me, if all the tigers and lions die? What will happen to the ecological balance of that habitat? The population of the herbivore will grow, correct? And when that happens, the herbivore animals will eat all the grassland surrounding that area. And when there is no more food, either they will have to go to somewhere where there is plenty of food, or simply they will die. All right? So there is an ecological balance here going on in which the carnivores are controlling the population of the herbivores by eating them. Now, in the plants, any disturbance in the native forest, such as clearing the forest for shifting cultivation, usually brings about a change in the species distribution. This change is due to the competition where the secondary forest species such as grass, bamboos or pines overtake the native species, changing the original forest structure, which is called succession. How will this process happen in plants? Supposedly, there is a large forest, okay, where a lot of bamboo trees are found, okay, a lot of bamboo plants are found. Someone comes and cuts all the bamboo plants. Now, there are other trees there, the secondary tree, which were oak. Now, since there are no more bamboo trees in the forest, the species which takes over will now be the oak species, okay? This process is called succession, in which the native species of that forest will change. Ecological balance may be disturbed due to the introduction of new species, natural hazards or human causes. Human interference has affected the balance of plant communities, leading to disturbances in the ecosystem. Because of human interference, a lot of balance of the plant and animal communities has been disturbed. Because of deforestation, what we do, we cut up the forest at a very large scale. Because of that, the animals lose their home. Such disturbances bring about numerous secondary succession. Human pressure on the Earth's resources has put a heavy toll on the ecosystem. This has destroyed its originality and has caused adverse effects to the general environment. Ecological imbalances have brought many natural calamities like floods, landslide, diseases, erratic climate occurrences, and so on. Because of our interference into the working of the nature, a lot of ecological imbalance are created, such as landslide, floods, and diseases. There is a very close relationship between the plant and animal communities within particular habitats. Underline this, diversity of life in a particular area can be employed as an indicator of the habitat factor. If we want to know that a certain habitat has a good amount of animals, that it has ecological balance, you only need to look at the diversity of plants and animals found in that habitat. Proper knowledge and understanding of such factors provide a strong base for protecting and conserving the ecosystem. If we want to protect and conserve the ecosystem, that means we first need to understand how it is being done. So students, this was it for our chapter. That is chapter number 15, Life on the Earth. I hope you all learnt well. Thank you so much.